Hello everyone, this is Apex, and you're watching the #1 ZywOo hater in the world.
Have you guys heard about the new CS-themed Mortal Kombat game? Apparently, it's got esports adjacent components in it that you'll recognise. Like they're going to have a special Gowles rage bar where what you do is you rabble-rouse with the crowd and use divide and conquer tactics to divisively infer, potentially even racial invective that makes people really upset until when you max it out, someone just runs onto the event and just physically assaults someone. Then there's the Smooth Your Passport, where once your character has travelled to more than 10 different levels or locations, they then only get to have 5 minutes in any future location before just being kicked out of the level, no matter how well they're doing. Or what about the Richard Lewis zone? It's kind of a final boss area where you get the main line into the underbelly of the industry. You get to see how it all works. You get to understand like how to make more money, how to succeed. But if you can't keep your head about you, a block just drops onto your head, killing your character dead where they stand. But the worst, the most terrifying and horrifying is the Golden Hornets level. That chant will haunt you forever. Vitality, la 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 la. Oh, stuff of nightmares. Now, if you enjoy my humour or want to save 10% off some delicious gamer subs, why not order with the code Thorin, Thorin, at gamersubs.gg? I'd recommend lemonade flavour. It's very delicious and refreshing. So, Vitality won IEM Cologne, the third prestige event of 2024, and CS2. It is the first trophy of the year for Vitality. Obviously, with this lineup, they won the 2 blasts at the end of the year fall and World Finals and beat FaZe Clan in both of those. That's all they'd won. They'd made finals, hadn't been able to win otherwise. ZywOo was the MVP. Understandably, only his second prestige trophy of his career, by the way, along with the Blast Paris Major last year. It's one of his only 2 in the last year and a half and less. Now, the form of Vitality coming in, yeah, people are going to go, people always do this. If Vitality ever has a bad team, like, first of all, they haven't been bad for ages. They had the Katowice and that was about it. Aside from that, they're always a top contender. It's just if you're a really good team, you can beat Vitality sometimes, especially if ZywOo has an off game. That's usually the main factor, right? Or Spinks doesn't do well. Flames was a bit streaky in the past. He's leveled his game up a little bit. So I think people always overblew the Vitality form issues. I used to say on all the talk shows, I wouldn't make a change in this roster. I'm sticking with this lineup. It's probably the best roster in the world. Now, look, the team isn't the best team in the world, isn't how they play, but they're capable with this roster of winning literally any tournament out there. They could win the Shanghai Major. I think right now they'd probably be their favourite too, right? I think Spirit can turn it around too. So coming in, they're always going to be under insane scrutiny and criticism because 1, they haven't won trophies this year. 2, people who are ZywOo fans think he should win everything. And then 3, because they're just ZywOo fans and they want him to win everything while carrying, they make out like he's 1v9ing and all his teammates suck. So that's always been insanely overblown. It's mega disrespectful. First of all, the Spinks, who's always going to be a top 10 player in the world in this lineup this year. And then quite frankly, Flames has probably entered that territory too. So you've got 3 of the top 10 players in the world. And one of them you're saying is the best in the world. Then that's enough. Mezzy rounds out the team, filling out, doing some clutches, some entry in. Apex makes things happen on CT side. On T side, I actually think he calls a very excellent T side. I'm quite impressed. I didn't expect someone who's an former entry player to have this kind of a feel for when to hit the sights, but he sort of uses his strength there. They use a lot of fast attacks, and when they go in, they do a great job with it. They also know how to win all the duels, right? So he seems somewhat suited to the T-side calling. I think he's somewhat underrated this year as an IGL. So I already thought that was overblown. But let's have a look at their run at this tournament. So as you can see, they came in all the way down here in the rankings. I mean, this is when they were invited, to be fair, or qualified. Yeah, that was when they qualified. Obviously, they're not in the play-in. They actually got what I think it's the harder group, because obviously you got G2 and Spirit and Na'Vi, but the rest aren't that crazy. Whereas this one's got Mouse, Vitality, FaZe, VP, even Liquid, and you know what I mean? I think this group's actually the harder one. So they had the harder group and they won it. So immediately, they obviously were doing awesome in the group stage. They murked Furia, like utterly destroyed them. Furia got 5 rounds total. And Furia, it's not like they have no firepower, but looked like they had it in that game. Also notice, winning Inferno Mirage, they've switched up their map pool a little bit. They're going back to the Mirage more. They're going back to Vertigo sometimes when people force them to play it and they can win on it. Then you have FaZe Clan versus Vitality. FaZe Clan could have won 2-0. ZywOo was actually very quiet in this series. Didn't really open up for my money. But they didn't get it done on Dust 2. And then the decider, people came alive on Vitality. They won this big series. FaZe was looking awesome. So this was actually probably a big confidence booster for Vitality. In the winners match, you played Mouse, a team that actually has the map pool to match you. They even have the strength to match you. Some would even argue as an actual team, like working together, they're better than your team. A lot of people probably think Shui's better than Apex. I don't know about that myself. I think I've seen Apex do it in a way I have thus far with potentially a better lineup. Not seen from Shui, although obviously Shui doesn't have a ZywOo, does he? This game was close when Mouse picked into Inferno. By the way, Vitality can pick Dust 2 and beat anyone on it. They picked Mouse Vertigo thinking it was a punish. Yeah, it was, but for them, they lost in overtime. Vitality, they're looking stronger and stronger. So when they got to the playoffs, I said it on my show, it's like counterpoints. Unless FaZe won this game and then gave them an awesome semi, Vitality was going to the final and they were going to beat anyone. Maybe G2 could have outfragged them. They still... I never believed in G2 to make the final. If Mouse had made it there, well, they've already beat them once, but okay, they have the potential in the best of 5 to get it going, but you'd need some of their players to level up in a big final a bit more, with a massive crowd like the Lank says, like 16,000 people and all for all, and pyrotechnics. If Na'Vi had made it there, I also thought Vitality was going to beat them. I actually made a bet that not only would Vitality win, I bet for them to win 3-0, so you can imagine how annoyed I was by Na'Vi winning this just too, because it actually could have been 3-0. By the way, it also could have been 3-0 to Na'Vi. That's just the way this game went. And then the main part of the game was obviously this one here. So we talked briefly about this. On Nuke, what happened was actually Na'Vi was doing all right early and they were getting enough rounds, but then Vitality was able to get enough on CT side. The problem with their CT side, you saw the same from Mouse against Na'Vi, and this is going to be a problem for Na'Vi, is people can put up with much more skilled types a brick wall for them on CT side. And now you need the most insane entries, late rounds, mid-round call from Alexi, people executing, winning the clutch. 2 or 3 players need to win clutches. It gets really hard for Na'Vi to win maps when you've got these really talented CT sides of the likes of Vitality, Mouse. I even think to some degree Team Liquid did it to them and actually looked at times like they were more skilled on CT side. So kind of interesting. That was actually obviously the best side for Ultimate, wasn't it? Then they pipped them though. Vitality came alive late and got the rounds they needed to. Then on Dust 2, this actually looked, for all the world, I mean, it's probably Vitality's best map on paper. It looked like Vitality was going to win it. They were in really good position, but man alive, you have to give props to Na'Vi for this map. This was actually some of the most incredible clutch play I have seen in years, basically since FaZe Clan 2022. If you watch the Na'Vi guys in this game, I actually think this series showed that Vitality is probably the best team in the world over the first 45 seconds of a round. Their openers are unbelievable on all these maps. They can get into site anytime they want. They can hit the same site 5 times in a row and still get in and get the bomb plant or have a chance to plant the bomb. Actually, a problem they had was sometimes not planting the bomb. The thing is, Na'Vi is probably the best team in the world in the last 45 seconds of the round or 30 seconds of the round. Man alive, can they win with low econ, with scrappy buys, with sometimes not even their best players alive. They just somehow work together, believe in each other, and they have this crazy clutch factor that at this point, you could say in the other tournaments, was it luck? Oh, was it luck? No, it isn't. It's why I even tell you, even though GL doesn't overperform that often, when you see him win those clutches, that is consistent though. I mean, actually, funnily enough, he did badly in this final. But against Mouse, for example, he had that insane clutch on Mirage that probably won them the series. So I think in this one, you saw some unbelievable play. But they are that team. That is their biggest strength right now. It's Alexi T sides. And then it's this crazy ability to do these retakes on CT side, just playing off each other. So that was an incredible... By the way, the series of the year already. Then you go to map 3. If you're Alexi B, this sucks because you've just lost another epic best of 5 Mirage mega overtime game like the one you lost 2 years ago in 2022 at Katowice to FaZe Clan. Hence, the only prestige event you've ever won, unfortunately, is actually the major. You've won PGL Copenhagen. You could otherwise have won 3. I mean, you could say, could he have won more than that? Nah, he couldn't have won 9 Katowice 2019. Nah, that's probably it. So he could have won 3, though. He could absolutely have won Katowice, Cologne, and the major by now. But he didn't. In this one, I don't think he was favoured to win. The G2 one, he probably was slightly favoured. At the major, funnily, if he wasn't favoured. So interesting how that works out, isn't it? In this one, the problem with it as well was it took so much out of Na'Vi to play these first 3 maps that when they lost, I also did worry that coming to Inferno, they'd be in trouble. Because Vitality won 10 T rounds. The game was over. Even though Na'Vi was coming back into it with loads of big rounds, it was just over though. Because the problem is they were getting a 12 way too quick. even they were on 11 for a long, long time. The problem you had if you were the guys from Na'Vi is this. You clearly don't love Inferno. You almost lost it to Mouse too. What you've done is when people force you to play it, it's not your original maps ever, you're never picking it, then in that scenario, yeah, you'll play it, and what do you always hope for? It almost started to happen here. Every time you need an amazing bit T-half. Bit plays an incredible apartments lurk where he can go first and he can duel the guy in the pit or the guys on the site, or he can go last and he can do a backstab and catch people rotating to mid. And he is so fucking smart at that. And he did start to do that late in this game, but it was too little too late. And unfortunately, he actually had a very poor final. It was him and Gel, normally the two overperformers, who I thought actually disappeared in the big matches. Whereas actually, funnily enough, people are going to blame Wonderful. His AWPing wasn't good. He was actually good with the other weapons, believe it or not. So, yeah, it wasn't the most insane individual performance from the guys on Na'Vi. Then again, you know what? Think about Mirage. You were winning like clutches from Alexi B to keep you in that game and against much better players. I also thought for Vitality, it was quite interesting because for my money, you have to look at the way they all played, and it wasn't just about ZywOo. In fact, ZywOo played so poorly for the first 2.5 maps. If this was a best of 3, he might actually have just lost the tournament and not even got to be the MVP. I think Spinks would have been the MVP then. Or it would have been someone from Na'Vi. So I actually, if you'd won, it'd have been Spinks. Spinks was the guy, fragging-wise, carrying you through the series. And by the way, yes, he plays a little bit too bitty. I'll probably do a video on him. I think his biggest problem is he plays like it's an FPL game. So for example, in clutches, he doesn't even give himself a chance. He winds it down to the last few seconds and hopes they just peek into his crosshair because he's an incredible mechanical player. You saw on maps like Mirage and Dust 2. It is bonkers how far he can hit headshots with an AK. His aim is, it's like a laser. It's so fucking sick. And so he had some very impressive rounds. Flames had some bonkers openers, but his problem is when he swapped to CT side, he's too antsy. He can't sit still. It's funny they have the opposite problem, Spinks and Flames. I actually hope they play together for a long, long time because it reminds me, if someone knows the reference, from Lurpus's 69N28E/Rockat team in CS 1.6 of the contrast between Conte, the mega lurker passive player, but he's a mega clutch player, where Spinks isn't as good in the clutches. And then the super aggro, aggressive rifle, nice aim of Ruit. The two of them paired together so nicely. They sort of offset each other's weaknesses and just combined strengths, didn't they? So I think that's one of the fascinating things about the core of the stars, because there are 3 stars in this team. And then Mezzi, look, his numbers weren't crazy over the series, but he wasn't a liability. And I'll tell you what, he's the reason they won that Mirage. Some of those entries he was getting was so fucking ballsy on T-side of Mirage. Think of what a nightmare it is to play into like a top team. There's the number 1 team in the world now, I think that they're playing. And he was running out with a Galil, with an AK, and he was just killing Wonderful. He was killing whoever was over at Ticket or near the jungle. Man alive, what a fucking amazing little run of 4 or 5 rounds that really got them into this game. And he was a guy who's just a soldier. I mean, it's funny how he's transitioned from like he was a support to an IGL to like he's a support and an entry now. The guy just does whatever you ask of him, seems to have no ego, and just a great contributing player. And then Apex, I actually think, called a fabulous final. Even if he'd lost, I was going to tell him, mate, you did everything you could there. I told him this at the major. I thought at the major he called a great major. He kept getting his team into the mid-round and getting onto sites on T-side, getting through the defenses, killing star players, and then his players lost the rounds, his players lost the clutches. Now, individually, he does have a problem, which is he still plays like he's a world-class player, and individually he isn't. So he loses a lot of those key rounds where he's in a 1v1 or a 2vx, because he just goes for the play. He's a guy who wide swings or just runs out into the open, and he gets fragged quite a lot in those scenarios. Now, you might think maybe he was riding high off the saw win. That's like fucking warming up on fucking bots, mate, aim bots, and then you go into a real game. Yeah, those real players shoot a little bit harder than the fucking aimbot that's just stood there, isn't it? Come on, mate. So I did think, though, he called a great, probably, by the way, an underrated IGL, like I've said before. He's top 5. I mean, you can say, yeah, but look at the piece he has. Mate, look at the pieces Chop has. Why isn't he winning Cologne? Yeah, he won Katowice, but what since? Yeah, he won Blast, okay. But he's not dominating every event. By the way, he arguably has 2 players that are better than any 2 from Vitality. Like, I think Spinks is really good. Flames is pretty good. But are they really as good as Donk and Shiro? Donk and Shiro is a 1A, 1B scenario. Like, Shiro himself could be like the 5th best player in the world. Whereas, especially when he's on his game. So, I don't know about that one. I think the only person who maybe could IGL this team better would actually be Carrigan. And obviously, he would actually frag worse than Apex, or who even knows if it would be a better scenario, right? So, as always, I told everyone this. All the ZywOo fans were hating on the other teammates. Wanted literally everyone cut eventually. Spinks need to be cut because he doesn't turn up in finals. Well, that's fucking rich coming from a ZywOo fan. Then you had Flames should be cut because he's inconsistent. He's a fucking entry playmaker. Do you even know how the roles work in this game? If ZywOo loves to rifle, just have him be the entry playmaker, shall we? Mezzy, he should be cut because he's not fragging. He does everything else and fills out and rounds out the team. And he's one less ego. Then you have Apex. Cut him, he's all washed. He's not any good anymore. Get Shu here. Get anyone at this point in time. You'd probably have fucking Kixon, wouldn't you? No, I wouldn't right now. I wouldn't swap Shuhei or Kixon for this guy. I didn't mind if Shuhei went to Team Liquid or something like that. Or G2. But actually right now, Apex is doing a good enough job. He's absolutely beyond serviceable. In this tournament, he was very good. He was actually one of the better reasons why they won the tournament. Look at the way he set up his teams on T-side. Look at the way he called. And he called the right pace too. ZywOo winning the MVP, I think, is totally fair. He's my MVP too. I would probably have given it to Spinks if the last few maps had gone differently, but ZywOo came alive and he absolutely was able, one of the reasons they won Mirage, especially on CT side. I will say that whole thing of like, he's like tied for the most medals in history because you're giving him 6 online medals. Whenever you think of that, you obviously think of LANs. He gets to have 6 online medals. Device had 15 medals and was 5 ahead of everyone when they were pure LAN. Like, this is just bullshit for history. But okay, he gets to win this one. That's legit. By the way, in his history, he's actually underperformed at like 2/3 of the prestige events he's played at. But hey, his record's a lot better in this last year or two, right? I mean, he was whatever. He was probably okay at like, I think he was good at like Cologne last year. He was obviously won Blast. They were kind of whatever at Katowice, and then this year, not that great at Katowice either, but he had some individual form. So I certainly want to see where his career goes. Big for him though. Individually, it's massive for him to get another prestige trophy. And now he has won Cologne and a major. Now let's get a Katowice. By the way, Simple's Cologne was technically inside of just a studio. It wasn't in the access. That's not really of the same stature. Simple's Katowice was in the sport deck, but with no crowd. That's not the same as winning with a crowd. So I'm always fair with how I give it out, especially to the all-time great players. By the way, contrasting ZywOo and Simple and Donk. I have an article on my Substack, IEMesports.substack.com, that you can read for free if you just sign up with a free account. It's called Help Us Simple, You're Our Only Hope. Interesting title, isn't it? Now, Na'Vi, I have a bit to say about. I could also have talked about Mouse, but we'll do that later on the shows. Na'Vi actually is so impressive right now. Even though they still don't have the like elite players that I want. Like maybe Bits becoming it, but he disappeared in that final. Wonderful isn't elite in that sense. He's just like a very good AWPer, but in CS2 we don't have many good AWPers, so there's just super elite and then there's just very good. For me, he's still like, the 4th or 5th best AWPer in the world. He's still a pretty good player. He's quite solid usually, not in this final as much. Alexi B might be the best IGL, or he's top 2 or 3. Who else do you have? Imma had a mad glow up and actually looks like he can keep some of the fragging, since I always told you he had fragging. And if they play maps like Mirage and... Actually, he wasn't bad on Nuke as well, even though normally he's bad on Nuke. I'd say more like Mirage and Inferno, a little bit of Dust too. Actually, he looked good in this final, Imma. He could, by the way, he probably would have been the MVP from Na'Vi's side because people would have gone, oh my God, what a globe. His numbers won't stay as high, but he can be a contributing factor. And suddenly Na'Vi gets a lot more dangerous if he can frag and doesn't get fragged, because the problem is he gave up a lot of deaths in past tournaments. And he's part of the reason they had that insane Mirage streak. By the way, remember, the Mirage streak was up to 12-0. They could have lost to Mouse. Mouse got to 10 rounds. They did 11 rounds, the highest anyone had gotten in the streak. They didn't know. Na'Vi closed it out. Then in the final, obviously, you got to 12 rounds from fucking the guys from Vitality, and Vitality won it because people forgot, not only had Na'Vi not played with this lineup against Vitality, but more importantly, they hadn't played on Vitality's Mirage. And Vitality themselves was 9-0, so they're now like 10-0 themselves for Mirage. And by the way, they could probably keep theirs going longer than Na'Vi's. They're a fucking bonkers team on that map. Just because of the raw skill. Like you saw on CT side, it just felt impossible to get in. Meanwhile, they could get in that A site any time they felt like it, pal. So Na'Vi right now is one of our favourite teams to watch. I love Alexi B. I love Blade. I enjoy Bits game. I think Wonderful's good. So yeah, this JL's winning the clutches, big impact rounds. You obviously have the Imma factor. Look, I enjoyed him in Game Allegiant. I'm waiting to see if he can continue this before I'm fully in, but I don't hate on him. He can stay for now. You can obviously win every tournament with this team potentially. The key thing is this. I've never this is what's going to make Na'Vi unique. Never in history has a team fluked a major that much, but then all the other flukes in history also never improved afterwards. Took them 3 or so months, but this team is like, I think actually like, fuck even 1.5. They're probably twice as good as when they won the major. It's actually insane. But we've got such a competitive field. That's still hard. Still hard work to win a tournament. I mean, by the way, I predicted on betting that fucking Saw would win Nuke against them, and they did. They won a map against them. I also bet that Na'Vi would win 2-1. So I think I have Na'Vi dialed in. I kind of know where they're at. I was amazed how many people were saying they were going to win the event once they made the playoffs. They barely played anyone good. Like Astralis was the best team they played, and Astralis is not a top 5 team, or even doesn't even vaguely look like it right now. And also, Alexi B can outcall fucking Device. I can tell you that for nothing. So, yeah, I think right now Na'Vi's a fabulous team to watch. Mad props to them. I think IEM Cologne as an event is the best event in Counter-Strike. It's probably the best event in Counter-Strike history. It even has the best trophy. That looks like a fucking UEFA's Champions League level trophy or World Cup or something. It doesn't need to be a major. It's probably better this event isn't a major because 1, they'd already fucked the format up. 2, they'd make qualification stupid, whereas I love the qualification here and the play-ins, the way it goes off rankings. And then 3, this event is already the best. So why not have this event and the major? Let's get greedy. Let's have Katowice, Cologne and the majors elsewhere. Then we can have 4 big prestige events that are really important and good in a year. Because when Na'Vi won EWC, you are frauds if you try to make that event sound huge in the sense of like historical context. It had a lot of prize money, but it had a stupid initial format where you just play like one team randomly in the opening round. Then you're into the top 8 already, or one team goes in that stupid BO1 plane. And then in the top 8, you only play 4 series. Best of 3, so you won the whole tournament. That's bollocks compared to this tournament. And also, the final was a best of 3. Notice how Na'Vi's been in 4 finals. The 2 that were best of 3s, they've won in 3 maps. And the 2 that were best of 5s, they've never even got to a 5th map. They've lost in 4 each time to Spirit and Vitality. Better teams than them overall with more skilled players. It's almost like I know what I'm talking about at this point in time, isn't it? So certainly looking for them in the future. I think Vitality has the potential to be number 1. Like, you win this event, you can win the Shanghai Major. They've got a chance to establish an era to win the Intel Grand Slam. If you have ZywOo, who can be the best player in the world, and I love it when he AWPs. I did an article about him on my Substack, ZywOo Born to AWP, where I talked about this. Has custom art. It's also free if you go there before it's 2 weeks old, and it'll go behind the paywall. So yeah, I think Vitality's in fabulous form too. G2 dropped off, but we obviously know how dangerous that new lineup is. FaZe looked like they were back until the playoffs at least, and then they got it going, but not early enough. Who else do you even have? Spirit bombed, but let's be real, they'll be back. Their team's too good. Those players are too good. I think CS is in a fabulous place right now. Roll on the fucking major, right? So almost every top team's won events now. Mouse themselves have won events. By the way, as I said at the beginning, if you want to support me and get delicious gamer subs, why not save 10% using the code Thorin, Thorin, at gamersubs.gg. Everyone needs a support network, and mine is, of course, my Patreon community, the Scrominati, who in many ways, they're the Sonny to my Cher, saying, I got you, babe. So this video and all the others on my channel were kindly supported by the following names: Ahmed Hadjou, Mac Pugnatio Rajcula, Adam Tomlin, Animosity, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Jerky's Minion, my main man, always going to be referenced, one of the best patrons of all time. Would you like to ask a question in my AMA? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest to see on my channel? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming Reflections and Talk to Thorin interviews are. Maybe you want to do one of those long discussions where you get to set the topics we talk about. Well, if any of these or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.